Life is too short to drive a Ford Fiesta. And yet, life is too short not to pursue the choices that will lead to one. Family or stability in your bachelorhood, fiscal responsibility, tall gears and short weekend getaways, brute efficiency winning out over the foxhole atheism of excess. The Ford Fiesta seems like the perfect economic antidote to capitalism's poison pill. But in the trade-off, I kind of feel like an NPC when I drive this. I don't even feel like a quest giver. I'm just a guy who talks about how the monster attacks in the village have escalated recently. And then when you talk to me again, I have one other observation about the weather, then it's right back to the monster attacks in the village escalating recently. You'll probably find me in a Boscov's greenery next to the middle-aged men complaining about their marriage and the state of the economy.
Why is WrestleMania so late this year? Who's making these decisions? Why is Easter so late this year? Who's making these decisions? You can't even paint eggs no more. You gotta take out a second mortgage.
But what are the pros of driving a boring car? And are the negatives enough to sink this entire experience? Well, I'm the Roman. This is Race to the Bottom. And today we're going to talk about the Ford so bland, not even influencers at the height of their powers could save it. Fiesta hatch in manual, it's a titanium. Oh wait, no, that's too obvious. 2015 Ford Fiesta Titanium. If this were any more basic, it would have a scrapbook of craft beer labels. So this is the Ford Fiesta Titanium trim. And while it is a top-tier trim, it's not actually the highest trim level. That would be the ST. And while you get more luxury comfort and amenities here, air quotes, you don't get the performance that you would get with the ST. So right here, we have a 1.6-liter engine making 120 horsepower and 112 pound-feet of torque matched to a 5-speed manual transmission. From factory, this setup gets you fuel economy around 28 miles per gallon city, 36 highway, and 31 combined, which lines up with the 33 miles per gallon our volunteer Jesse gets on average. And this has these forgivingly tall gears that I love because while I love manual transmissions, it always seems like I'm constantly fighting with them, But hey, I never stalled this. Okay, maybe once at a traffic light, but then this was generally a perfectly lovely driving experience. Even though it's an experience of extremes, you get these tall gears up top for highway cruising and gradual acceleration, but it generally feels like you're not exactly getting much out of this car if you're sitting anywhere else but up in those top gears, because there's not really anything here below 4,000 RPM. I mean, Jesse warned me about this, but even then, I still wanted to come to it with an open mind. And yeah, that's pretty much true. There's not a whole lot going on in the lower rev range, Of course, I don't know that I was really expecting that much on the low end. This isn't much of an issue if you do a lot of city driving, but it becomes obnoxious when moves that would only require minimal additional power on the highway suddenly become needlessly difficult. I'm talking just moving over to take an off-ramp or getting over to let somebody pass. I just need a little quick burst of something and it's just nothing is really happening. And it's a frustrating ding against the car because while this may not have a whole lot of power, it's got some fun dynamics. The handling is great on back roads and uncrowded small town streets. I got us lost while driving back to the filming location, and it was one of the happiest mistakes I've made while filming because I got an extra 10 or so minutes just playing around with this gearbox. It's stable in a way you might not expect from a car this small and this light. I've been in bigger cars that the wind just turned into a wobbling house of straw, but I never felt that way in this. It may not be a pickup truck, But this is basically the perfect car for cruising with the windows down, getting that farmer's tan, and listening to the debut album from Charlie Straightlace, featuring the hit single, I Don't Get What He Has That I Don't, parentheses, I'm Nice, and the follow-up hit, I Want to Be Different, Just Like Everybody Else. 2015 Ford Fiesta Titanium. A car for when the guy who grew up riding Cloud and Sephiroth Yowie finally gets his life together. Now, there are some issues, yeah, but none I would necessarily consider disqualifying. For one, the battery will drain if you leave the AC in the on position when you turn the car off. Apparently. I mean, the fact that this has actually happened to Jesse before is wild to me. Has this ever happened to you? I have never heard of this happening, but I don't know, just let me know. Also, the idler pulley has a habit of getting loud.
But I think it's the idler.
And the factory lug nuts are a disaster waiting to happen. Apparently, Fords of this time period had this two-piece lug nut, and it would be steel nut, phrasing, and they'd have this super thick aluminum cap on top. And so in cases of extreme heat or in other cases of like moisture, this would expand like Violet Beauregard. And if the nut didn't already rust on there, the expansion would prevent you from actually being able to get it free. You know, you're just going to end up with a nut that's impossible to get, like you have ED or something. Now, of course, the obvious solution is just use different lug nuts, but sometimes people find out about this issue too late. Jesse even recommended that I look this up on Ford forums, which I did, and hot damn, there were a lot of stories of people essentially destroying their wheels in the desperate, fruitless attempt to get these lug nuts free, because it'll be on there tighter than some oil and an impact wrench can do anything about. So you have to make sure that, you know, you're keeping an eye out for rust. You're keeping an eye out for these lug nuts. I say this, but it's like, why would you keep the lug nut on there anyway if you knew about this problem? So forget about keeping an eye on it. Like, what value is there really to having the factory lug nuts on there? Supposedly, Ford doesn't even cover these under warranty. So just get rid of them, you know? But again, you have to know that this is a problem in the first place, and sometimes by the time you find out, it's too late. So that's another ding against this car, but I just don't really feel like these are disqualifying problems because it's just a case of a car having another maintenance quirk. I feel like a lot of cars have these really esoteric and particular quirks about the maintenance that you have to keep an eye on. But I think when it's a car that's as relatively inexpensive on the used market as this is, at least from my research, you tend to be a bit more forgiving on these types of shortcomings. Jesse's example here is mostly stock, save for the ST spoiler on the rear hatch. Jesse got this for under $10,000, and I know, you're thinking 10 grand for this? But the lack of major work in the years he's owned it has more or less justified the cost. It hasn't left him stranded, it hasn't had any major breakdowns or any major mechanical failures or big issues of any kind. Sure, if the goal is to peacock for strangers you'll never see again once you leave the turnpike, then you might feel like you're in timeout driving a car like this. But you're not in kindergarten anymore, Adam. And if you were, I'd tell you the same thing. Timeout is a state of mind. Hell, give me all the time out. I enjoy my own company, and having the freedom to do nothing else but engage my imagination while staring at a wall, that sounds delightful. For crying out loud, staring at a wall is how the songs were written for Charlie Straightlace's sophomore album, Where's My Hug?, with the moderately successful singles Homeschool Prom King and Scrapyard Tycoon. That's right! Country's original incel outlaw is back, and he ain't done learned nothing about courtship since high school. Your daughters have never been safer. Now, what are the non-financially driven reasons why you would choose a Ford Fiesta Titanium? Well, as he tells it, Jesse wanted a 4-door hatch since he's a father, and he wanted to bring the family along on various outings and road trips, but with the option of throwing the seats down if he wants to bring the dog. And I can also see how this would be more fun than an SUV, because it's lighter, it's smaller, it's more nimble. And being a top trim in 2015 means it's pretty close to modern base, with stuff like Bluetooth, keyless entry, voice-controlled smartphone integration, a rear-view camera, and the most bearable, low-tech touchscreen I've seen in ages. And like any car that eventually becomes an economy great on the used market, you're probably not going to be hurting to find parts for this, even if Ford doesn't make this car anymore. In a lot of ways, this is the car Nissan Altima drivers think they have, because it's actually cheap and actually fuel efficient and actually dynamic enough to be fun at times, in spite of its Euro-adjacent aesthetic. And I know, some people find that aesthetic appealing. I don't know that I'm one of them, although I could imagine that with enough time this would grow on me. You see, this was a world car, essentially, yet not necessarily designed to American tastes. It's compact, it's minimalist, it's got these defined, shapely curves and European handling characteristics thanks to the input of Ford's European division. It's almost aspirational for people who want something unique and unchallengingly exotic without the accompanying price tag of something you might actually notice, because these were anywhere between $18,000 to $21,000 new, depending on if you got the sedan or the hatchback. It's basically an economy car that Ford decided to modify on your behalf by swapping in some nicer seats and Bluetooth. And it was a natural progression for a car that, for a while, was one of Ford's best-selling nameplates, right up there with the F-Series and the Escort. This was a designated super mini that sold well enough to survive from 1976 to 2023, and was a domestic alternative to the import boom in the wake of the oil crises, because there were two of them, of the 1970s. But it was also counter-programming to the K-cars and minivans of the 80s, and the SUVs and pickup trucks of the 90s, and the crossovers of the 2000s. It's kind of remarkable how much history this car had survived right up until the point Ford decided, in much the same way most American automakers at large did, that small internal combustion engine cars were no longer justifiable within the current economic climate. Which is something I still don't entirely understand, what with hybrids resurging as they have been in the past year, and certain companies walking back electrification plans. Of course, there's a much larger reason for everything that's happening in the auto industry right now in 2025 that I'm unfortunately going to have to talk about on the next Roman Report. Just kick me down a flight of stairs, for crying out loud. But the fact of the matter is that Ford managed to make a success out of a concept that probably shouldn't have been as popular as it was, given what Americans typically go for, both then and now. Yet Ford, at least in the 2000s, took a different approach to keep this car relevant, in a way that was reminiscent of how Lee Iacocca had promoted the Mustang in the 60s, because he'd given out test drives to college newspaper editors and, I believe, radio show hosts, people with a line to younger audiences. And in this way, he pretty much had them doing free advertising for the car. And it was the same deal here with what Ford dubbed the Fiesta movement, which sort of sounds like a fancy name for the corporate pizza party that they throw you instead of giving you a Christmas bonus. Long story short, Ford utilized social media by giving Fiestas to roughly 100 influencers for something like 6 months and having them make videos and posts about their experiences driving the car and featuring the car in their content. And while you probably wouldn't think this would work, it actually did help prop up the Fiesta from 2009, when the campaign started, through to 2011. But the problem is that you can't really sustain that kind of hype, and no matter whether or not the car was good, the market was beginning to move away from fuel-efficient compacts. Why? I couldn't really tell you. Other than that, tastes simply changed. Not that the complaints changed with them, mind you, as people continued griping about gas prices while choosing to work against their own interests by driving big old gas guzzlers. Because people don't want a real solution, okay? They just want to pay less for gas without having to change anything. Yes, gas prices are bad, but it's sort of like a guy who complains he never gets any dates while never bothering to do anything that would make him appealing to another human being. Apropos of nothing, don't forget to check out Charlie Straightlace's third album, Red Pilled Blue Collar, with the single What's a Guy Gotta Do to Be Where Your Lover's Been.
That's right, Daddy! Country music's original Rosie Palm Stranger is back with more music for dipping French fries in mayonnaise!
Look, I empathize with the desire to drive something nice. Because life is too short not to treat yourself sometimes. But I also feel like those decisions would come with an appropriate attitude adjustment, because it doesn't make sense to complain about the depth of the hole while you're holding the shovel. People could buy cars like this, and suddenly the gas prices, while still lousy, wouldn't be as big of a concern. But we resist it. Because the only thing harder than change is realizing you have to. Ford Fiesta Titanium, the official car of gym TVs that just play music videos and medication ads. God, I hate medication commercials. It's always some guy in his kitchen cutting a carrot, talking about lowering his A1C. Get the fuck out of here. So what's the point of the Ford Fiesta Titanium? I think the Ford Fiesta suggests that individuality can still exist within the collective, even as the individual blends into it. I've always admired self-assured cars, the kind that don't feel the need to proclaim. And in some ways, it feels more important now than it likely was in its own time, because social media has only gotten worse at enabling attitudes of keeping up with the Joneses. We curate our lives for observation, to elicit the right responses, to leave the correct impressions, to tell people we're living correctly. But it's also resulted in a greater sense of judgment from one person to another. Because displaying your life for the world to see opens you up to opinions that you might be doing life wrong. And people get so lost in their judgment that they kind of ignore their own shortcomings, right? Because nobody's perfect. Like, why are you worried about the splinter in my finger and not the rusty nail in yours? Why do you care what car I drive or what music I listen to? I happen to like Charlie Straightlace, particularly his farewell album, Dispatches from the Seminary, with his song, No Second Chance.
Yeah, that's right. The original outlaw's back for one last rodeo, baby. Moms are so scared of him, they call him Red 40.
The Ford Fiesta Titanium isn't a great car, but it's a competent car. And if I really had to put an adjective on it, I guess I would say it's fine. And there's nothing wrong with fine. Fine is worthy of praise. Because not everything needs to exist at extremes of either manifest excellence or abject misery. And if all I ever drive from here on out are fine cars, well, that's just fine by me. Okay, technically it's not, because the whole point of this show is to find the worst car in the world. As you can see, our rankings are remaining unchanged, because why wouldn't they stay that way? This wasn't a bottom 5 car, but it also wasn't so great that it would make the top 5. As such, this lands in the ass crack of the race to the bottom. Big surprise, as I continue my search for the dirt worst car on the planet. If you think that's your car, please email me at regularcarstheroman@gmail.com. And if you have a car that you think Brian might enjoy, hell, email me there too, and I'll forward it to him. Especially since we don't really have the submission website anymore. Right now, we can only accept submissions from those willing to come to us in southeastern Pennsylvania. But if you think you have a car so objectively awful that not even I would find anything redeeming about it, please hit me up. I wanted to do a quick plug for Guys with Rides. You see, this Saturday, April 26th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., they're hosting their inaugural Best Fest car show, celebrating the classics from 1972 to 1999. It'll be at the Flying W Airport in Medford, New Jersey, and hopefully it'll fill the Radwood-sized hole in the enthusiast heart. If you enjoy this series, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or even subscribing. But if you'd like to support RCR in the biggest possible way, consider joining our Patreon. For just $1 a month, $1, you'll get a bunch of early release and exclusive content. My newest RCR Stories video had its early release last week, and Brian is dropping uncensored classic RCR style content in addition to his new podcast, which is so raunchy I can't even share a clip here. If this show adds value to your week in any way, please consider joining us over on Patreon. Lastly, for every new order placed in our merch store linked in the description or on the product shelf below the video, I'll send you a personalized thank you video. No matter how many orders or how few orders come through, everybody's getting a thank you video, damn it. I'd like to thank Jesse for volunteering, and I hope you get to make that trip back up here, man. I really do. And I'd like to thank each of you for watching and for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of your day. Have a great rest of your week. We were kids when I wrote that song. Now you're 7 months along. I let the moment slip away. Just got to save the date. I never really took my shot. I guess I forgot, but you chose the tux that I would have worn, but damn, your fiancé sucks. I told you it's not your fault as the floorboards thump with my liar's heart. I've never been so damn mad at someone before. And now I'm as hollow as apple cores.